Have you ever made a bad choice? Who hasn't, right? But have you ever made a bad choice that blew up a city block? See, it all started when Danielle Leese decided to attend a Marilyn Manson concert. Now, depending on your musical taste, that may have been her first bad choice. But then she decided to drink there a lot. And that led to rowdy behavior that got her kicked out of a Marilyn Manson concert. And then Danielle made the worst choice of all. She got behind the wheel of her dad's car. And 7 minutes later, she crashed that car into a house. And that crash broke a gas line. And the explosion of that gas line blew up 4 houses. The Canadian Broadcasting Company called this the car bomb fiasco. Yes, this did not happen in Florida. It happened in Canada. A Canadian did this. And now Danielle is spending 3 years in prison and getting sued by a lot of people. And Danielle is suing too. She is suing the arena for serving her all that alcohol and then letting her get behind the wheel. Now, I don't know if she'll win, but she does kind of have a point. You see, alcohol increases that chemical in your brain that leads you to impulsive decisions. And at the same time, it shuts down the part of your brain that helps you make good decisions. That's a double whammy. But, having said that, Danielle started drinking when that part of her brain was working just fine. So there's that. Now, I've never made a bad enough choice that I blew up a city block, but I have made choices that certainly blew up in my face. And you know what? I made them stone cold sober. Ever made a choice like that? A choice you regretted? A choice that derailed your life, that hurt others? And no substance messed up your thinking? No, you messed up your thinking all on your own. Now, in hindsight, you see that messed up thinking. But why didn't you see it then in the moment? Why didn't you see it before the choice? More crucially, how do you begin to see that thinking now? How do you grow to make better choices, to make wiser decisions? When the words we're about to hear, God shows you the way. And so let's listen and hear what God has to say. And as we get ready to hear, let me share some of the backstory. The main person in this story, David, when he was a teenager, God destined him to become the next king of Israel. And when this happened, Israel already had a king named Saul. But God had lost confidence in Saul and, in fact, had told Saul that his time was limited. Yet, even though David knew his destiny to become king, he served King Saul loyally. He fought bravely in Saul's wars. He even played music to soothe Saul's troubled spirit. He became Saul's son's closest friend. But Saul sensed David's destiny, and out of fear and jealousy, he decided to end that destiny by trying to kill him. And that forced David, that choice of Saul's, forced him to flee for his very life. And that is where we take up the story. In the 24th chapter, beginning in the first verse of the book of 1 Samuel. Listen and hear the word of the Lord. When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi. It's like a desert area. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to look for David and his men, about 500 men David had, in the direction of the rocks of the wild goats. I've actually been where this is. It's like a ravine off the road. There's all these caves that Park Market up in the cliffs. And you see the goats still hanging out there thousands of years later. And he came to the sheepfolds beside the road where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave, and the men of David said to him, Here is the day of which the Lord said to you, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you. Then David went and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. Afterward, David was stricken to the heart because he had cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. He said to his men, The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to raise my hand against him, for he is the Lord's anointed. So David rebuked his men severely and did not permit them to attack Saul. Then Saul got up and left the cave and went on his way. Afterward, David also rose up and went out of the cave and called after Saul, My Lord, the king. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the ground and did obeisance. And David said to Saul, Why do you listen to the words of those who say, David seeks to do you harm? This very day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you into my hand in the cave, and some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not raise my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. See my father. See the corner of your cloak in my hand. For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your cloak and did not kill you, you may know for certain that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you are hunting to me to take my life. May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not be against you. As the ancient proverb says, out of the wicked come forth wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. Against whom is the king of Israel come out? Whom do you pursue? A dead dog? A single flea? May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between me and you. May he see to it and plead my cause and vindicate me against you. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So how do you make better choices? How do you make wiser decisions? In these words, God shows you the way. God tells you here to pay attention to the tension. Pay attention to the tension between love and between fear. Now, what does that mean? It means at the heart of every choice you make lie two contrary impulses that drive you in opposite directions, love and fear. And the Bible continually warns you against letting fear be the one that drives your decisions. In fact, the very first bad choice in human history had fear at its root. Do you know that story where Adam and Eve eat from the tree that God told them not to eat from? Now, when they made that bad choice, Adam and Eve opened up a whole human history of bad choices. But hold on. Like, God tells you not to eat from this tree, and then you eat from this tree, and that messes up the rest of human history? How does that make sense? It makes sense when you realize the story is not about the tree, it is about the trust. See, God is saying to Adam and Eve, trust me. Trust me about this tree. Trust me when I tell you it is not safe for you. Trust that I love you, that I intend the best for you, that I care about you. And when Adam and Eve distrust God and instead trust the tree, why do they do that? They do that because the serpent comes along and tells them, you can't trust God. You cannot trust God. God doesn't really love you. God doesn't really care for you. In fact, God is holding out on you with this tree. And so they get scared. They get insecure. And then in that fear and insecurity, they look to the tree and say, the tree, it's called the knowledge of the good and evil. That will give us security. I mean, how can that knowledge be bad? But it is. Two writers, John Eldredge and Brent Curtis, put it more eloquently than I could when they wrote, Satan's seduction of us always comes through a story that gives us greater control through the knowledge of good and evil rather than in the unknowns of relationship. And so Adam and Eve, looking for control, look to knowledge, thinking that will free them from fear, but it doesn't. It just makes them more scared. It makes them more insecure. So that when God appears, they run and hide. And when God calls them out, they have to admit to God their fear. And for the very first time in the Bible, that word fear appears. And ever since then, human beings have let fear drive them to bad choice after bad choice, because here's the pattern. The less and less you trust in God's love for you, the more fear and insecurity drives your decisions. The more you look for that love and security in all the wrong places, and those places can be countless. They can even be good places that you make into ultimate ones. And then that leads you to a life of bad choices. A life so far from the love and from what God dreams for your life to be. But in this story, how does David overcome his fear to live into the love? I mean, David had real reasons to fear here. Saul was coming against him with 3,000 men, 5 or 6 times more men than David had. And Saul was close. David and his men were hiding in this cave. If Saul and his men find them, they're cornered and they will die there. And Saul and his men are within earshot. They can hear them just yards away. And then the unexpected happens. Saul experiences a call of nature. And it is clear that it is a number 2 and not a number 1, if you get my gist. By the way, I think this is why my son finds this his favorite Bible story. Go figure. So Saul goes into the nearest cave to relieve himself, the very cave where David and his men are hiding. And David's men say to David, this is your opportunity to quell this pursuit and win the kingship all in one fell swoop. All you got to do is save us from this pursuit and get a leg up on becoming the next king. Yet David does not do that. Does David do it out of fear? No. David has killed foe after foe in battle. Killing Saul in this situation would have been a piece of cake. No, David does it because David is compelled by love. First, David realizes that God had called him out of literally nowhere to become the next king of Israel, and that this God had protected him again and again throughout his life, including during these days where Saul pursued him and was trying to kill him. In fact, you can read song after song in the Bible that David wrote telling of God's love for him in these very days of pursuit and exile. But he realizes at the same point that this God never told him that it was his job to kill the king who was in power. That was something for God to do, not David. But beyond trusting in God's love for him, David also loves Saul. Did you notice what at one point he called Saul? He said, "My father." Because Saul had become like a second father to David. I mean, this was his best friend's dad, for Pete's sakes. And to kill this man that he loved, even as much evil as he had brought into his life, seemed to David just not the right thing to do. Certainly not the loving. But David did have fears. He feared what his men would think when he didn't kill him. Would they walk away? Would they think David a coward? He had to wonder, what if God can't be trusted? What if God lets me down and Saul ends up pursuing me until finally he kills me? What if God doesn't really love me? And you see, the challenge behind those fears is when fear rises up in our life, evil makes it look a lot like love. In fact, that's the way evil always works. Evil always makes evil look good, like something good, even like love. And so David could have rationalized to himself, if I really love my men, I got to kill this guy who's chasing us all. That would be the loving thing to do. Or, gosh, God didn't tell me to kill Saul, but wouldn't that be doing it God a favor? Kind of moving the timeline up a little bit, giving God a little hand. But David doesn't choose to do that. He chooses to trust in the love. He chooses to trust that in God's own way and in God's own time, God will deal with Saul. And his job is simply to trust that God will be with him. And if you read ahead in the story, you'll understand that that is what happens, that Saul does die in battle by his own hand, out of fear of being captured by the enemy. He commits suicide. And what if David had killed Saul that day? He would be known forever as the king killer. He would be known as someone who had killed the former king in a dishonorable and humiliating way. And how that would have compromised his kingship in the years to come. But still, it must have been hard, because fear often looks like love in the moment. It deceives you that way. Last Saturday, the Hollywood Rotary Club, to which I belong, sponsored a 5K run on Hollywood Beach to benefit the Police Athletic League. And I registered to run. I was going to be there to volunteer like a good Rotarian. But in the end, I did not go. Did not volunteer. Why? Love compelled me not to. You see, I have many roles in my life, but I only have two unique roles that I alone can do. To be a husband to my wife and to be a father to my son. I alone can do those. And I have committed, with very few exceptions, to make Saturday the day I dedicate to them. Exceptions are weddings and funerals, by the way. And that day together has built the love between us like no other. And as for the Rotary, love didn't drive me there, fear did. I feared not appearing to be a good Rotarian. I feared what my fellow Rotarians would think of me not showing up. You see, I fear terribly the disapproval of others. I really like to be liked. And I was getting ready to throw my family under the bus to quell that fear. Thank goodness I didn't. By the way, sometimes, I told this out to be honest. It's not in the sermon script, but actually, my wife helped me. Because I said to her, I got this thing at the Rotary Club. She says, no, that's our family day. Okay. Whew, okay. It's on you now. I'm like, no, it's not. She said, did you really? No, I know. I know that's where I'm supposed to be. But, so I couldn't even do it alone. I had to have my wife give me the courage. Now, your fear may not be my fear. My fear of the disapproval of others, but you have a fear, maybe a few, that capture your heart. And the question is how do you know when that fear appears, often disguised as love? How do you make sure it doesn't drive you into choices you regret? Well, first, you got to find out what the fear is. It's not too hard, really. Just think about the things that you're most terrified of losing. And it'll point you in the right direction. But then, once you know the fear, you've got to be able to recognize the love, to trust in it, to trust in this God who loves you no matter what, to trust that that love is real, that that love is there for you. In fact, that experience of love is what gave David the courage in those moments of decision to make the right choice, when even his own men were urging him to make the wrong one. Now, as powerful as David's experience of God's love was, you have more than David did. You see, David had a God who defended his life again and again. But you have a God who defended your life by giving up his to free you from your fears. And yes, God led David to show mercy to his enemy, but you have a God who in Jesus did that for you personally. When Jesus was arrested, his own friends abandoned him. His best friend denied him. And when he was being killed on that cross, when his enemies, us, in the worst decision that human beings ever made, a decision driven by fear, we were killing him, what did Jesus do? He prayed for us. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And yes, God gave David an earthly kingdom, but those kingdoms come and go. But when God came in Jesus, when God died for us, God has given us a forever kingdom. A kingdom that can live within you. A kingdom not even death can defeat. A kingdom that in the end will overcome everything. Now, do you see that love all of the time in every situation? No, you don't. But Some days do you not see the sun, but do you still trust it's there? And the more you trust in that love, even on the days when you cannot see it, but trust that it is even more certain than that sun ever could be, the more that love will free you from the fear. And as Jesus frees you from the fear, Jesus will lead you deeper into the love. And as you go deeper into that love, you become more and more free to trust in that love in every choice you make. You ask, what do I have to be afraid of? I have the ultimate security. I have a God who has chosen me. I have a God who gave his life for me in Jesus. I have a God who's defeated death for me. This God, Jesus said to me, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And Jesus, I know this God loves me no matter what. And when you know that, when you trust in it, even on the days when you don't know, like you wish you could, then that trust will lead you deeper in the love, to choose the love over the fear, to see the fear when it masquerades as love, and to live in that love. And as you do, you will more and more discover what a wondrous choice trusting in that love is. Amen.